says live on Facebook.
Yes, it's supposed to be. Hello, hello, hello. This is so much fun. Let's just wait for the room to fill up. Good afternoon, everybody. Good evening. Hello, hello. Okay, great. We have a few people watching. We can wait a bit for the room to fill up.
Was it really too good? You're so much better at these things, Rei.
Yeah.
Than I. Let me finish my grammatical sentence. I'm so much better than I.
Okay, good evening, everybody. It's just about 6. We're just gonna wait for 2 more minutes just for the room to fill up. Hello, thank you for the hearts. Thank you so much for being here. We're so happy to have everyone here. Welcome to our safe space discussion. All right, we'll get started. Good evening, everybody. My name is Rei Launya, and I'm a Voice member. Voice here, we stand to raise our voices or lend our voices to many different causes, not just literacy or literacy. So for this week, since it's Mental Health Awareness Week in the UK, we decided to host numerous mental health awareness activities on our Instagram and Facebook pages. And this is just one of our main events. We're here this evening with Ms. Raisa Khan, who is a psychologist, and she'll be sharing in discussions through our safe space about handling stressors at this time, ensuring that you're mentally aware, you're making sure that your mental health is in check, and checking on your strong friends and those around you. Just overall feel good information. So we want to welcome you again for being here. I'd let Raisa introduce herself.
Thanks, Rei. Hi, everyone. Good evening. As Rei so lovely put it, I am Raisa Khan. I am a counseling psychologist here in Guyana. I have my own practice, which is Anaira Counseling and Psychological Services. I also am on call at Mercy. And I also work with Equal Guyana, with as an LGBTQ NGO here in Guyana. And so I've been practicing in Guyana for almost 2 years, which is kind of crazy because it feels like just the other day. And I see individual groups, adults, youth, children, quite a diverse set of persons with diverse set of issues. So I'm very happy to be here. Rei and I had a great discussion and we're like, let's just do this. So here we are. Rei has told me that there are some questions, so we're gonna we're going to try and get through some of those. And I think, Ray, I don't know if persons will be still commenting their questions, and we'll see if we could, I guess, get those in as well.
Yeah, we'll still continue to check the comments to see persons who might tune in and have some questions, but for now, we'll just start with the questions that we received earlier. The first one being, what is mental health?
Right. So, a very basic understanding of what mental health is, it is the emotional, psychological, social well being, your well being. And either it can be positive or negative, and it can be impacted by multiple factors, and it can affect the way that we feel, act, and think. Really, that's the most basic answer I can give you in terms of what is mental health.
Okay, great. So if someone were to break it down, because I remember reading an article where they explained mental health and mental health illnesses or disorders, they said it's usually steering away from normal thinking, normal behavior, and normal reactions. Would those words encompass abnormalities when it comes to diagnosing perhaps a mental health condition or a mental health illness?
Right. So, what we look for in trying to assess or diagnose someone is we're looking at, like I said, multiple factors. But when it comes to, what you just explained, the normal behavior, normal reactions, we're looking to see also if their level of function has been affected. So, in the DSM, which is the holy grail for basically all psychologists, it tells us, and you'll see the line is literally there in the criteria, must clinically affect levels of function for your academic, social, and occupational. So it must impact you in such a way that you are not able to function well in either your job, social circles, or social interaction, and or academic. And so we are looking for that because there are persons who they'll come and say, well, I don't sleep well, or I haven't slept well for the past 2 weeks, and that kind of thing, or I haven't eaten well, that kind of thing, or I'm not caring to socialize. Now, if that's something that's kind of normal, like, okay, maybe they're an extrovert, they don't like to hang out with people, that's different from someone who is an extrovert saying, well, I used to be an extrovert and now I just want to isolate. That's usually like a red flag. I would want to learn more about what's happening there. So we're
So
looking
if
for
you,
change or different changed behavior.
okay, so as a layperson, if I observe those behaviors with someone who's close to me, a radical change in behavior, them being usually a very happy person and all of a sudden being progressively very sad, wanting to isolate, being by themselves, or persons having very high energy levels in the beginning, but being very lethargic, would that be an indicator that maybe something might be going on?
Yeah, I'm like I said, there's several things. Some people change and their mood becomes very depressive. Some people's mood become very manic, so that's very hyperactive. People may not be able to focus. People are maybe really good at their job and they really are not doing performing well in their tasks. They may have a change in self-esteem. Even they may not say certain things, or they may now be certain saying certain things. You want to look at things like risky or impulsive behavior when they weren't really an impulsive person. um, People might be avoiding interaction. They might, like I said, the mood change is not just being sad or happy, but like aggression, frustration, anxiety. Like I said before, changes in sleeping, eating. So these are kind of things we look for. Excessive worry all of a sudden. And of course, and I know this discussion was also very important related to COVID, and we are going to see increased levels of anxiety, increased levels of worry, increased levels of uncertainty. And we're also going to see like an increase. And I always talk about this after COVID's done, whenever it's done,
Whenever.
we're going to see like an immersion of persons who have now increased like OCD. So not OCD, the disorder, but obsessive compulsive behaviors. So this
Behavior.
is the cleaning and the groceries and the shoes and the taking off and the hand washing and People might also suffer from hoarding. So these are persons who may not have had much, and so they're hoarding stuff as they go along through the process of dealing with a pandemic. So stuff like that. So we're going to see a wide variety of disorders that may come about as a result of COVID. But in terms of what I look for and what people should be concerned about, yeah, those are some of the things they should be concerned about.
So here in Ghana, what would you say is maybe the average person or the average ratio of mental health diseases or persons who suffer from mental health disorders here in our population?
I can only go on my small sample size of my clients because we haven't seen major research in mental health across the country being done. At least I don't know of really countrywide mental health research being done in the recent like year or two or since I've been home. But let's say I have seen 150 clients in the past year, right? And let's say about 50 of those suffer from some form of anxiety and or depression. Another 50 might suffer from like PTSD. But the thing is, like, people can suffer from what we call comorbid. So they're tacked on top of each other. So you might have experienced a trauma as a child, and that has gone through the years, and now you have depression and anxiety. But what I will say is, what are some of the disorders we often see or circumstances? For example, what I've acknowledged and I like to get people on board with in Guyana is there's a condition called CEN, so childhood emotional neglect. And that is one of the major things I see in therapy. A lot of times, persons are now adults and they have no self-esteem, no sense of worth, no sense of what they're good at, things to be proud about. They don't know how to venture, how to trust, how to open up, how to be emotionally expressive, because all of those things were invalidated as a child. And so we see a lot more persons coming with anxiety and even self-esteem issues. And it's not that it's a major disorder per se, but that uh, it's a condition or a byproduct of CEN. So I
Wow.
would say CEN is probably one of the more popular things. Of course, trauma is very popular across Guyana. There just isn't enough psychologists to deal with the amount of trauma that we see in the newspapers on a daily basis. So I know there's a lot of
That's
people in Ghana
actually
walking around with
that's
PTSD.
actually really sad. Yes, because different persons, especially in different settings, have been exposed to different forms of abuse. And I know generally here, the idea that emotional abuse does not exist is very common. Persons just kind of link abuse to either physical or sexual abuse, but emotional abuse can be even more damaging because it changes how you perceive yourself and how
Yeah.
you think as an individual. You will not become an independent, self sufficient, confident, um, functioning human in society because you'll always be looking for validation in the wrong places. You'll always be second guessing yourself. You'll always feel as if what you're doing is not enough, and that just continues a cycle that
Mhm.
is basically destructive.
Yep.
So, for
Yep.
persons who are dealing with COVID, amongst everything else, I feel like in the newspapers, they're pushing them trying to find the cure for this disease or a vaccine for this disease, but there's not a lot of light being shone on what persons might be facing based upon the shift in their mental health state. For
Right.
example, persons would have developed deep routines that involve them going out and socializing. And as you know, humans are very social. So you want to maintain some sort of normalcy during this time. But
Right.
in addition to anxiety, what are other things that you might see happening as a result of this pandemic? I know you mentioned OCD. What else might there be?
Right. Hoarding, OCD, agoraphobia. We are going to come out of this pandemic with persons who suffer from agoraphobia. Agoraphobia is the fear of being basically outside or within a crowd or by yourself outside. And so they are persons, I have already seen it, persons who literally are not leaving because they're genuinely scared and genuinely don't trust going out, don't trust other people. And so this is not just your, oh, well, I'm following the guidelines. We all should be following the guidelines and being, going out limited, limiting our going out and stuff like that. But at the same time, there are people who have genuinely told me, Riza, I am actually scared to death to go outside. And that for
Yeah.
me is really scary because I know that that sounds like the onset of potentially developing agoraphobia. So we do see persons who, will have excessive worry, excessive anxiety. Some people may genuinely just feel really alone and suffer from loneliness. There are persons who will suffer from depression or feeling depressed. There are persons who also, a little bit of a long shot, but very important to include, is we talk about PTSD, but before, like, persons can come out with PTSD as well, just because persons who live with their perpetrators, so whether these are two adults and one is being abused, or this is a child who is witnessing parental abuse, or if this is a child who is being abused by an adult, whether sexually, physically, verbally, emotionally, there is still a likelihood that, yeah, we can also come out with PTSD that is not related to COVID, that is specifically related to the fact that they have experienced trauma and were stuck at home with their perpetrators. So that's one of the social issues that definitely need more
That's
highlighting.
really scary.
Yeah. And the thing is,
One of the things that came for me, even when this pandemic,
go ahead.
started, I thought about my mom, my dad, my immediate family, but then my mind went to those kids that used school as an escape from their abusive parents, or that wife or husband that their jobs, or their social church meetings, their walks in the park, their runs on the seawall, as a way to get out of that space. And now you're being forced in an environment where you have to stay here because obviously that's what's best for now. But nobody knows exactly what's happening behind closed doors, what's happening in that space in your circle.
Exactly.
And that's a very scary thing because nobody knows how long this process is going to last for.
Exactly. And actually, I would say the things you just described is what in therapy we call, or in psychology we call, protective factors. So when someone's sitting down in front of me, I'm trying to assess what are their challenges, but I'm also trying to assess what are some protective factors they have. Do they have family? Do they have any financial stability? Are they working? Do they have the capacity to work? Do they have any education that can get them a job? Do they have a job? Do they have friends? Do they have a community? Do they have any religious community group? Hobbies? These are like the things that I would say that and I always tell people, as people are talking, some of my clients will be like, oh, I'm rambling, I'm sorry. It's not rambling to me, because as you were speaking, I am building a puzzle in my mind of, okay, here are the things we have to consider. Here are the things that she has that's protective. Okay, good. Now this is the issue. Oh, I see how that's related to her past. And so I'm building a picture. And so it's really important to have those protective factors that you just talked about, because without them, people tend to feel very vulnerable or are vulnerable, um, especially when we look at like the domestic violence and the gender-based violence and or child abuse. Like you said, school was a protective factor. Work is a protective factor. If your perpetrator gets to leave you for 8 hours or 10 hours a day, trust me, you know the difference. Like you can sense and feel the difference. If your children, and that's the other thing too that we have to kind of look into eventually, is the other social issue that we're now hearing more of is how is COVID going to impact education and the education of our children, and also just how our children learn and how they feel, because we have some parents with good intentions, but they're not the best home teachers. And
Yeah.
so they may also be really scaring or making a negative association or building up a negative association with their children's schoolwork. So even those things are really small but impactful in the long run.
So it's interesting that you brought up school because we got a question from a young lady and she was asking, even at this time where the Zoom university is the going trend, persons have now had to shift how they learn and how they're able to retain information.
Yep.
How or what advice would you that are now consuming information in that way and their focus not become depressed about the situation and ensure that they're able to conclude their courses effectively?
Right. I think um, I think a way of looking at education now, especially for persons who are like in tertiary level, um, because there's a little bit more control in their hands. Like it would be different. The different advice would be different for a parent with an 8-year-old versus like a 16, 18, 21-year-old who's in university or tertiary or fifth form or whatever. Um, is you're going to get bogged down and you're going to get overwhelmed and frustrated and annoyed, and that's okay. It's okay to feel all these emotions at this point in time. What I would encourage persons to do is to keep going back to like when we get totally unmotivated. No, I don't want to write this paper. And oh my God, I hate the way this teacher teaches like this, or I'm a note taker and I need to sit in the class and take notes. Um, I would say, first of all, do you know how you learn? I didn't really know how I learned until I was in my master's. And then once I got it, I was like, oh, I feel so empowered, you know. And everybody, you have to try and error. If you're the person who likes to read and read and read and highlight the whole book and that works for you, good for you. I thought I was. I'm not. If you're the person who needs to take notes as the teacher talks, try that. If it doesn't work, that's not your thing. If you're the person who likes to um, like tape, like record your therapist and then not therapist, your teacher, and then go back. Therapist is always in my head. Go back and take your own notes. That works too. Mine was very strange, and I'll tell you guys, and maybe it might work for you. I used to do a lot of presentations, and I was like, why is it that I can be prompted by just seeing one pointer, and I could talk for another 5 minutes on just that point with just one single point? So what I did was I was preparing for an exam and I put everything on a spreadsheet, like 11 pages of spreadsheet. And I prepared as if I was preparing for a presentation. And I stood up and I talked to myself and I walked around the room and I looked at my screen and I prompted myself. I wrote almost exactly what was on that spreadsheet the next day, the next 2 days later, because it was
Wow.
so ingrained in my head because I practiced it over and over like a presentation. Now, of course, if persons are not good at presentations, A, I get it. B, this is also a great way to learn to be better at presentations. But it took me till I was
Definitely.
in master's to get it. So don't feel away if you're not sure how to study. And the second advice I would say regarding school at this point in time is go back to why you even chose that course, or go back to why you even chose that degree, and always keep reminding yourself about what was your plan, what was your goal, and keep reminding yourself so that you can be refreshed on why you chose that course or why you chose that degree, because that will hopefully be motivation. Hopefully you chose your degree and not your family, but that happens and I get that.
Yeah.
I would say go back to that motivating factor, because even at my hardest time in my master's near the very end, I had to keep telling myself, I cannot fail. I cannot mess this up because I need to be a therapist. I am meant to be a therapist. And the whole again, this is the pressure I put on myself. The whole again is waiting for me. Indeed, 2 days after I came home from Barbados, I had a job. Like, and I was like, so that was my motivating factor, even in the
Yeah.
toughest of times, right? So I encourage persons to find whatever it is that motivates them and kind of stay focused on that.
Also, in this time, with persons being home, distractions come about, but not in the ways that we might think. Social media specifically. Social media can be
Right.
a good thing and a bad thing, and there's lots of information about COVID, its effects. You see some people dying, you see numbers, you see statistics. What role does social media play on your mental health? Consuming all of that information over and over and over, and or disregarding that information, more persons being home, scrolling through things like Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, comparing themselves to others based upon body image, status, achievements. Everybody's launching a new business. You kind of feel like you're not doing anything. What are some ways that this can tell on your mental health?
Right. So social media, like you rightly said, it can be both positive and negative. I mean, um, there have been some major benefits to having social media, having lives. I mean, look at this platform right now. We wouldn't have been able to have it without social media, without lives. I mean, I sat in two Zoom meetings yesterday, one in Toronto and one in, I don't even know where the other one was, Barbados, right? So it has helped, but what people need to consider is how much time are we spending, but also equally important, what are we taking in? The amount of time that people spend um, engaging in like gossip or memes or catty fights or drama. You know, Guyanese love a drama, you know? And so always being
Yeah. Like, hey, girl, I tell you
right.
this
So
story. I see this thing online. I got to
right.
tell
And
you.
so if you get wrapped up in all of that, I always tell people think of your mental health and your physical health as quite equal in the sense of if you are spending, you're taking in a lot of junk food and you're taking in, you're using a lot of drugs and you're not working out and you're not taking your vitamins, your insides are not going to be so great, right? Your health is not going to be so great. And so we have to think about it mentally as well. If you're taking in just a lot of drama and gossip and hearsay and stuff like that, and you're not taking the same amount of time to listen to something motivational or listen to what they call like humans of New York and humans of India and that kind of motivational stuff, and or reading a book online or reading an article about like what our country's doing about COVID, because everybody's just talking about numbers and deaths and vaccine.
Yeah.
But people actually are also writing and doing lives on really great things like what have countries done and what countries are already planning to do pertaining to things like the childcare system, the education system, the economy, how the world is now going to work in terms of job placement. So there are actual positive things out there, right? And I also always encourage people like, don't feel bad about falling down the wormhole of unicorns, puppies, and dogs. I mean, like, if it makes you happy, go ahead and Google, cute puppy videos or whatever, whatever kind of keeps your mental health in check and also um, makes you. I think what is also important is being able to know when you have hit your peak of information. I think that that's really important. Like when you have reached your level of absorption. And I remember on a radio station, I called in and they asked, how do you know? And I'm like, well, is the first thing when you wake up to thinking about COVID? Is the last thing when you go to bed you're reading about and thinking about COVID? Are you having excessive worry? Like these are also signs, like you mentioned before, onset of something maybe a little bit more serious, but it also is suggesting that you are just too enmeshed with this topic. And a lot of times we're taking in this information, but there's nothing we can do about it. So a lot of our sense of hopelessness and helplessness start to kick in, and that's not healthy.
Yeah.
And so we always encourage people, give yourself a cap for how much you're gonna take in, and know when to switch it off or know when to be prompted or have a family member who checks on you and says, hey, enough screen time, right? Even if you have to be treated like a child. If you don't have the discipline to know after 4 hours of screening through Instagram that maybe you should come off, then yeah, you will have to have a family member say, hey, enough, come eat, or hey, come help me with this project, you know. So I think it's really a very collective thing for some people to be to put that discipline there for you.
So getting back to, I think it's inequity at this time. COVID was a disease that came and basically humbled everybody. Rich, poor, middle class, black, white, old, young, everybody was affected. Everybody felt its effects. However, differently. The
Right.
worries of a poor person would be, I'm unable to provide in this time. That's my main concern. Whereas somebody who's more financially stable, their worries would be, how am I able to protect my assets at this time and gain more so that I can continue to be well insulated where I am? How
Right.
do you feel that inequity based upon a person's pre existing status before entering this pandemic could play a role on their mental health?
Well, I think that my belief is that mental health is can affect anyone and everyone. Mental health also does not discriminate. So yes, rightfully so, someone who might be of the upper class, upper echelon area may not have the same kind of issues or concerns or worry of that of someone who's working class or lower income, but that doesn't mean that they don't too suffer with anxiety, low self-esteem, PTSD, CEN. And so COVID definitely, what is the more the reality is that more average persons, working class, are going to be affected, especially like in Guyana. And so the issues are definitely um, there in the sense of, and I was explaining to someone the other day, I said it's not just persons are losing their jobs, but persons are not sure if how much more longer, even if they have their jobs, how much more longer can they keep it in an economy that's either suffering or is going to dissolve. Um, some businesses in Guyana don't have the capacity to know how to reinvent the wheel. It is what it is. And they may not know how to move from the type of job they have into something that could work during COVID, right? Like, okay, if you have a corner shop, you got a corner shop. The only way you can upgrade your corner shop is if you put it on like social media,
Yeah.
right? Like you and six other people are selling the same cake of soap. What is so special about your product? And so it's also about finding that niche, and that's the issue as well. And I will say this, something that's also very important to think about when we think of mental health and COVID and the economy and stuff like that is anyone who's ever interested, you can Google this, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. The basic, the basics, it's like a pyramid. I wish I had it. I don't have it. I was gonna buy a mug with it on. I thought it was so cute. It's on Amazon. Someone gift me a gift, but it's Amazon. It's like a triangle, and it has the actual hierarchy. It's a triangle, and so Maslow believed that we cannot ascend to deal with like things like self-identity, mental health, self-development if we don't have the basics. And the basics was food, protection, safety, shelter, sex, something else, right? So like we can't ascend up the triangle, up the hierarchy to have certain things developed if we don't have the basics. So at this point in time, someone might not be able to deal with their mental health stuff just because they are not going to spend time or money on therapy when they have to figure out how to buy groceries or how to get their children back in daycare or if there will be any daycare and when it will start. So definitely, as someone put it the other day, we're all in the same ocean, but we're not in the same boat. Your boat and my boat are not the same,
Mm,
right? And so,
two different boats. I could be in a canoe and you in a yacht.
mm-hmm,
Well insulated, but I got like little, Two different boats.
Um,
That's actually a really good analogy. I like that.
yeah, and actually, and even so, you and someone else could be in a similar canoe or canoe, but their canoe has holes. So we think you're on the same level. You think that person's on the same level with you, but you don't understand why they're sinking. Perspective.
Yeah,
Right? So that's what I would
that's
have to say.
true.
We have to be able to understand that
That's
this is going to be different for
that
everyone.
is so
People are going to have to um, reach out to people because that is it's a broad question, right? Like, I feel like persons need to probably like, if people are going through these issues, they need to either speak to a professional, a family member, a friend. They need to be okay with asking for help. Guys don't like to be vulnerable, wrong and strong all the time. And so we need to be okay with asking for help.
so in a time where persons need to prioritize other things like groceries, GPL, GT&T, all of those things, and they're unable to get to someone like you that offers these services for a cost or other persons in your field, what can they do to handle or manage those stressors that we were talking about earlier?
Right. So this is kind of where your coping mechanisms or your coping still skills would come in handy. Now, it is not necessarily a thing that we teach our children in general, but it's definitely a skill that we really should be consciously trying to learn. And as we get older, we have our own kids, consciously try and teach them. Right. So coping mechanisms are going to be individualized to each person. Basically, a coping mechanism is anything that we try to do to either tolerate or reduce a stressor or anxiety or anything that's making us feel uncomfortable, basically. And so coping mechanisms is kind of split, so positive and negative. And so like negative coping mechanisms might be um, drugs, alcohol, binge eating. That's not really good. And people, I'm sure I'm gonna get a response, a lot of shock mouths on Instagram, Facebook when I say this. Netflix binging is also not necessarily a good coping mechanism. Yes, I said it. Don't hate me, but it's true. Think about it. I have so many clients who tell me, "Oh, well, I was binging this and that." I'm like, "Oh, what is it about?" And they're like, "Well, this is what happened, but for the last 3 episodes, I didn't even like listen." So sometimes, a lot of times, it's just a background, it's a companion, it's a distraction from reality. And if you have coping mechanisms that are trying to make you escape reality, that's not really a good coping mechanism. It's good for the moment, but it's not good long run. Sleeping, excessive sleeping. People who take a power nap to feel good about themselves, that's fine. But extreme sleeping for long hours, trying to, again, that escapism, anything that makes you forget about reality is considered like a negative coping mechanism in the long run. Positive, and I always like to talk about the negative first because I want the positive to stay with you.
Stay in the
So
mind, yeah.
stay fresh in that mind, right? So your positive coping mechanisms are going to be multifaceted. This is things from going for a walk, doing meditation in your house, doing yoga, taking your children for a walk around the corner. There's a video on my page with like a list of, I think, about 20 odd coping mechanisms. And so I encourage people to go back and listen to that one as well. I encourage people to spend family time. You want to kind of get your coping mechanisms kind of multifaceted. So you want them to get one that's like physical, one that's social, one that may be family oriented, one that's um, individual, like to you, one that might help grow like your sense of self, sense of self-esteem. So one with your family might be like playing board games, watching a movie. I encourage my clients to play like hopscotch and Saw Out and Red Rover if you have a big family, right? Stuff like that. So they are things that can be done with your family um, individually. Now, this can be something as small as playing music, learning to learn a language. Some persons just need a breather. It's okay to just step outside, take a deep breath, hold it in, and release it, and go and make a cup of tea. And that could be your coping mechanism. Nothing wrong with a simple cup of tea, in my opinion. Um, Knowing when to take a break is really important. Knowing when you, like I said, when you're hitting that area where you're really feeling overwhelmed, and being able to verbalize that, saying to your partner, saying to your sister or family member, whatever, I just need a break. I'll be back in 15 minutes. And even if that means going and finding a spot in your home or finding a spot in your yard, I always encourage people, like, is there a space in your yard that, you can do something for yourself, or just sit down, take a breather. Some people are now doing planting, people are doing crafting, people are doing crafts with their children. Um, some people are contributing volunteerism. Like, that's what I did with like my time the past couple of weeks. I've been organizing my clothes, trying to put them in donation piles, making contact with different regions across Guyana. And so I've filled it with like volunteering. I've packaged masks. So everybody's going to be individual. So it's really anything that's going to be there to try and help reduce any anxiety, um, or any emotions that stress, like you mentioned, might be mentioned, that you mentioned before. Cooking, baking, those are always easy for some people.
Okay. Just looking at the live comments on Facebook, I just like to address two questions. So someone asked when you mentioned CN earlier, is there anything that you can do to address CEN? So how
Personally,
would
or
you
like,
treat CEN, or how can you address it?
right. So CEN needs to be treated in therapy. And there are multiple types of therapies that attempt to treat CEN. So if you want to know more information about CEN, there's actually a doctor, who I actually get, like, because I got the website for clients, but obviously I want to clear what my clients are getting before I tell them to check them out. So Dr. Jonice, Jonice, Webb, Webb. And she talks about the different types of therapy that have used for uh, treating CEN. There is all sorts of therapies that are techniques that are used, reparenting, self-love, self-compassion. We have to debunk a lot of the emotional neglect you would have suffered, or emotional abuse you would have suffered. I often have to really get into the mind of the client and pull out all those negative things they say about themselves, because we've already recognized it comes from childhood. And then we have to heal from those childhood issues. And then we have taken away some of that power from those wounds, if that makes sense.
So would persons who become codependent adults have suffered from CEN, or are suffering from CEN?
Mm, CN affects a lot of things. Codependent, it could be, yeah. I could see someone who's codependent, that is, seeking validation because they were invalidated as a child. And codependent persons are the what we call the fixers. So they want to fix people, they want to support people, they have a hard time saying no, they have a hard time, they go with the flow. And the thing is, when you have someone who's codependent, they're very susceptible to abuse, obviously, because they are there to, save that abusive person from staying and being abusive. But they
Yeah.
also can end up being very empty, they suffer from chronic emptiness sometimes, because you have been people pleasing your whole life. You have not been given the chance to develop who you are, what you like, what are you good at, because you've always just gone with the flow, because that allows you to stay, be around people, support other people, because that makes you feel good, and that's great. I support a lot of people and I feel great about it, but I'm not codependent. There's a difference. I can say no.
Yeah. Another question is there any particular period a behavior must be observed to be considered an issue with someone's mental health?
Yeah. So you mean as in how much time they need to be behaving that
Yes,
way before we diagnose them? It
yes,
depends. The older DSM, because the DSM updates every 5 to 10 years or so, and the old DSM, I think, used to state how long. The new DSM, I don't think it states that. It just says you need to meet these criteria for X amount of time. Some disorders have very specific time. They'll say, has the child been behaving like this for the past 6 weeks, sometimes 6 months? The old DSM, I think, used to be a little bit more like when I did social work. Yeah, I did social work like 12 years ago. The DSM then used to very specifically say it needs to be for 3 months, 9 weeks. So yeah, you can actually like the DSM is not like I said, it is our holy grail, but you can find it online. So you can actually put in, and I'm not encouraging people to do this, but
take it
maybe
with
I
a grain
should
of
do
salt.
what to do. Maybe I should, because I don't want you guys going. This is not like I don't want you guys to go like how you guys go on WebMD and then
Yeah.
self-diagnose yourself. Because I have had
This is
people.
not this is not right. I can't say go on this
No,
thing and then if I read it, I got it. No, we're not telling you to
exactly.
do that.
No. But if it is that you want to learn more for your own self-development, yes, you can go in and type in DSM criteria for whatever disorder you would like, really. But DSM-5, sorry, DSM-5 criteria for FOR, whatever. And it's just online there. Obviously, it's not going to give you everything that's in the DSM, but it gives you the criteria and you will see. Because people have messaged me and been like, I have borderline personality disorder. And I'm like, where did you get that from? And they're like, oh, I've seen the signs online. I said, okay. Come in and you still need, I will then assess you.
Yeah.
Right.
So we got a question on grief, and I feel it's a question that needs to be addressed, especially at this time. We're losing a lot of persons to
Right.
COVID-19, and we're not able to grieve in the normal way we would, which is through wakes, through get togethers, through a normal funeral service, burial, etc. But in addition
Right.
to that, there are also persons who are dying of non related COVID causes, such as old age, hypertension, cancer, etc., and you're still not able to grieve or cope in the traditional or normal way. What advice would you give to someone who's going through that?
Right. And this is the thing. Grief is, I don't think we understand grief well in Ghana. I say this only because I've seen people being told by their own family, all right, well, Galan, get over it, man. It done past 3 months ago, the man dead. Um, it's not very, you can't
Yeah,
put a time limit on someone's grief. And so what I will say is that usually when we have bereavement, there are different techniques that we use. Sometimes we'll ask a client to start with something as simple as writing a letter, but we have to assess where they are in their stages of grief because there are stages of grief. So there's denial and anger and bargaining and depression, and then we finally eventually get to acceptance. And you will go through those 5 stages on and on and on until you get to the final stage. So some people can be in grief for 6 weeks, some people can be in grief for 6 years. And so it's really important that you don't put an expectation on yourself and understand that it's a process and that even though we are missing these things like wakes and a traditional burial, that that is a part of a tradition and doesn't necessarily mean that the person hasn't. The thing is, we've embedded tradition so much into our grief, or the whole world has, with final rites and stuff like that. We are concerned for example, very religious people are concerned for the spiritual well-being of the persons who have passed on and stuff like that. Rest assured, I'm pretty sure the persons who have passed on would not want you worrying anymore about their spirit and worrying further, as in you need to start your process of grief. Just because the burial wasn't complete or the wake didn't happen doesn't mean their spirit hasn't gone to wherever they belong. And again, I'm not religious, I'm a scientist, so don't quote me on it, but theoretically, I would tell persons that grief has stages and that you're entitled to feel what you're feeling and that you need to recognize what is happening. I think a lot of times people just say, well, I'll cry it out and get it over with. But then what happens the day that you step back into their home and
Yeah.
you have a breakdown all over again? What does that suggest? That tells me at least that you're not over it or you haven't processed it and you're being re-triggered. You see a picture and you're like, oh my God, and it's a whole thing. You're being re-triggered. I tell persons that um, one of the times that we can recognize when someone has gone through the acceptance phase and has processed grief is when they're able to be triggered, because you still will be triggered. Father's Day, Mother's Day, a birthday, an anniversary, a holiday, a smell, a food, a song, all those things trigger people. But does it leave you in the same extreme feelings you were feeling as if the event just happened? Are you being taken back to that place? And if it is that you're still being taken back to that the first time you found out they passed away, it means, yeah, you haven't really finished the completion of processing the death. And so I would encourage persons to take it slow. Like I said, writing something as simple as a letter, what I wish I could have told you, or what I wish you could have seen. There's also guided meditations on YouTube for bereavement that are really great. Actually, sometimes they're really helpful. Good to get that cry out.
Yeah.
And then we have I have told persons, as we have current like memorials, I have had clients who have made photographs or frames or a altar in their home that is for that person. And so that is different types of ways people grieve as well, and keep that person close to them. And so even though we can't have the big funeral and stuff like that, you can still have a space in your home that's dedicated to connecting with this person that you've lost.
Yeah.
Right. So those are just a few things, but understanding the process and you can't force it. And that every time that you are re-triggered, always checking with yourself. And the day that you actually don't fall apart when you're re-triggered, whether it's 3 weeks or 3 years, you should pat yourself on the back because that meant you passed through a very difficult time.
Difficult time. And
And that meant
people deal with grief so differently. So it's important to understand that, grief is personal. So just take the time to process it in the same way that you would.
Exactly. And again, don't be so concerned about the fact that we're missing a traditional aspect. It doesn't change the outcome of their soul, and it doesn't change the outcome of your grief. It may feel like that, but you still have to grieve whether they have a proper funeral or not.
So another question we got was, what's the best way? No, sorry. How does therapy help those who don't have a diagnosed issue? So if you don't feel like you have an issue, should you still seek to just go and talk to somebody?
Oh yeah, for sure. A lot of my clients, like I said, 150 odd people who've passed through the office. About the other 50, I didn't mention, the other 50 are not diagnosable. They've had breakups, they're going through a job loss, they may have had a miscarriage, they may have had a termination of pregnancy. They're not necessarily diagnosable. I still treat people whether I can diagnose them or not, because they still have ongoing things that are affecting their psyche. So absolutely see a therapist still. I have had someone who came to me the other day about they wanted support to try and enforce boundaries with their family. Something that people
Wow.
might even think is like, serious, but they're like, no, I need your help, Riza, on how to be assertive, what language to use, and how to be assertive with my family and them attempting to break my boundaries in terms of like emotional support, like the family member who's always like you see this in parentified children,
Yes,
parentified children who grow up have a hard time with boundaries with that parent. And so now
because they were the shoulder to lean on for the parent.
right. So Ray, you are doing so well. You should be a psychologist.
Mental health is an area that is very, very, very close to me. I
So
am no
happy.
expert, so I'm no Riza Khan, but I've done a lot of reading. I do a lot of reading, especially when it comes to stressors and coping mechanisms, because before I found, just like you mentioned, coping mechanisms being bad and good, I thought, and I still think now that I had then bad coping mechanisms. And now boundaries, that I'm glad you mentioned boundaries. Boundaries was something that I struggled to do because I always thought about, oh my God, like what did the person feel? Like I had to tell that person no, like why would I say that to that person, But it's actually really great that we're still able to establish those things so that you'll still be firm in your beliefs, and you can say no and still be a nice person. You can still say no but say yes another time. It just depends on the situation. So I'm no expert, but I do a lot of reading. So this is
Yeah.
an area that really, really, really warms my heart.
And that's what I mean. Like people during this time, I can't give you, I am not going to be able to answer a question that might touch on every single person. But if there's something that you're like, oh, I never thought about that, Google it, YouTube.
Yeah.
I watch Katie Morton. Already a therapist and I still watch Katie Morton because she's like my psychologist idol. My YouTube psychologist idol. And she always has good stuff. For persons who deal with narcissists and have been through narcissistic relationships and stuff, they are two women on YouTube I watch a lot of. This There's one of she's a life coach. She was the daughter of a narcissist mother and the
Whoa.
wife of a narcissist husband. So she got it double. And she is a
Both
life coach. And
sides.
she's so able to break down like better than the DSM. She can break down and give you examples of some of the things that narcissists do in the way that they do it. And so you have to give yourself a fighting chance. YouTube, how to say no in a nice way, like it can be done.
So
Self-development.
one of the last questions we'll take for the evening as we wrap up is, are there any support groups that you know of here in Guyana for persons who have either mental health illnesses or have a disorder such as anxiety or stress? A space where collectively persons can come together and have the same safe space discussions we're having this evening.
Right. Now, group therapy is something that I've been really hoping I would get enough positive feedback on because the problem was I had the space, but people were not all fully on board. And now that we're getting more people on board, I may not have my space anymore that could hold easily 15 people, like an office that can hold 15 people. If anyone's ever
Yeah.
been to my current office, they know what the new office looks like. It's half of the room. So it's going to be very different. But I know the Wellness Center does therapy for depression, and they also have an Alcoholics like Anonymous group. There is also another group I have the number for if people, and this is not for alcoholics. This is a second group. Sorry, I'm done with Wellness Center. um, there are there's another group that is for family members of alcoholics, which I think is really important group because the family members of someone who's an alcoholic have developed or have been exposed to things that could cause them distress. And so I
Yeah.
thought it's really cool to have a group just of family members. And that's, I think, there's team in Georgetown as well. And then I know for LGBTQ persons, there's Bible, Guyana Rainbow Foundation, there's Eco Guyana, there's for trans persons, Trans United, and stuff like that. So you can contact your NGOs or contact LGBTQ organizations for support. I'm probably going to be the psychologist that you're going to meet with anyway, if you call those organizations. So they are persons, and we're growing more in psychology, but in terms of group therapy, I don't have enough information at this time on that. There are NGOs who do have group sessions. Wellness Wednesday did a women's motherhood discussion at GRPA last year. Went very
Yeah.
well. I facilitated it, and we looking to do more. So if persons are interested and would like me to do a group, let me know. But the problem is with COVID, we may
We'll have
not.
to do it on Zoom.
They're right. We're gonna have to do it on Zoom, Zoom world.
Zoom,
And
Zoom,
so if
Zoom.
persons are interested, do let me know about what kind of group you would want, because I'll specify this. There are two types of group therapy, open and closed, right? Closed is what we would probably go for then because of the stigma and confidentiality, which means we start with these 5 people, we're going to end with these 5 people. And if you want to join in on the group session, you have to wait till the 10 weeks is over when we start another group. Because this way, there are pros and cons to it, but the pros for most Guyanese is that they get to know the people who are in there over a period of several weeks. They come to trust them, and they can open up more. If we have Tom, Dick, and Harry and John come in one week, and then Joe, Sue, and Kim are next week, what happens to that person who made the connection with those people and trusted the people before, but now don't know these people here? So I just wanted to put that out as well. Always ask if you're going to group therapy.
That's a really
ask
great point.
Are you in a closed group or an open group? Is this group therapy closed or open? Okay.
Well, guys, I think we've had such fruitful discussions this evening. I'd like to thank everybody for tuning in. We had about 20 to 25 persons average on our call, which was amazing. So I'm really happy. I'd like to end this by saying thank you, Riza, for doing this session with us. For those that don't know, I'm a part of another organization called the Global Shapers Community, and Riza is a former shaper, and we connected through that medium. We kind of hit it off immediately, and I asked her so nicely if she'd be willing to facilitate this session for Voice, and she said yes, and here we are. Again, I'd like to say that Voice is an organization that promotes oracy, literacy. We're here to promote and build young leaders, the future of tomorrow. But with using our voices, we love to lend our voices for specific areas and topics. And this week, it's just for mental health awareness. Last month, it was for Earth Day. So we want to encourage you guys to use your voices, use your platforms, check in with each other, check in with yourself. Write positive notes, indulge in positive coping mechanisms, as Riza would have highlighted this evening, and ensure that if you feel like you need professional help, seek that. There's no use self-medicating. There's no use using Google as your doctor. You need to go to the professional so that they can assist you and you'll be able to heal from whatever it is that you're suffering from. We're not promoting Google as a place for you to get all your information. It's a very good tool, but you still need to seek the advice of the professionals. And Riza listed some great places that you can start, whether it be from group sessions, whether it be reaching out to persons who are in the social work or psychology space, or actual psychologists or psychiatrists.
Right.
Here in Guyana, we do have an entire unit at the Ministry of Public Health, the mental health unit. I would encourage anybody to utilize their services if applicable and ensure that you get the help you need. If you broke your leg, you would go to the emergency room. So if you have a mental health disorder, you need to get help. It's just
Exactly.
that simple. It's just
Yep.
that simple. You might not see the hurt, you might not see the trauma, but the effects are real and they're long term. It needs to be treated just like any other condition. So again,
Right.
we'd like to thank you, Riza, for being here with us. Thank you for our viewers. You guys were really great. I'm
Everyone.
so happy this went so well.
I
happy.
cannot believe there's like 200 people. I'm gonna go now. I'm gonna go watch back. Not only watch back, but I want to see what everyone said. Thank you everyone for tuning in. Like I said, if you have questions, there's the Naira Counseling and Psychological Services page, or you can call me on 629-0809. And that way we can talk a little bit more about if there were questions. Actually, I'm supposed to be doing a live this week. So if there were any questions that weren't answered, you can just message me and I can hopefully address those. I just remembered. Sorry, shameless plug, Ray. Shameless plug.
That's fine. In this time, you need to, pull all the plugs where you need. Everybody hustling out here. It's fine.
Exactly. So yeah,
It's
so if
fine.
I missed one of your questions, by all means, send me a message on Naira Counseling Psychological Services and I'll address it this week in my live.
Again, thank you all for joining. We're tuning
Thank
off
you.
for the evening. Riza is going to watch our replay since she want to see what people were saying in the comments, but this was great. Again, we
Yes.
encourage you to lend your voices. Mental health is an area that I feel needs more attention, specifically here in Guyana. So please, if you like the content that you saw here this evening, share it with your friends. The live is going to be up on our page. Our week of activities still continue up until Sunday, so be sure to tune in tomorrow when we do the love note to your future self. We have Affirmation Saturday, which is on Saturday, and then Self-Care Sunday to close off our event. So again, thank you for being here and bye.
Good night.